It is with great sadness that I bring you this video today. On a Wednesday morning on Portland Avenue in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a 37-year-old U.S. citizen named Renee Good was fatally shot by a federal immigration officer. Now, the incident happened just blocks away from where George Floyd was murdered back in 2020, on a street already heavy with memory of police violence. I'm David Tomsick, and you're watching Clear Signal. This video will also be rebroadcast on my sister channel, Loud and Clear. Almost immediately, two irreconcilable narratives formed. Of course they did. The Department of Homeland Security claimed the officer fired because he feared for his life, alleging Renee Good tried to ram agents with her vehicle. A key federal ally, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, went further, labeling it an act of terrorism. Now let me stop there. This is what they always use. This is their defense for everything. Everybody's a terrorist, and they're committing an act of terrorism against the American people, against these federal agents. Right off the bat there, I think this is bullshit. But the highest officials in Minnesota who have seen the video evidence tell a completely different story. Governor Tim Walz issued a stark public warning. Don't believe this propaganda machine. So what really happened on that street in Minneapolis? We're going to try to get to the bottom of it today and see how this can affect the whole country, how it can spread discontent to cities across our nation. Number one, the investigation wall. Now, the search for truth should always begin with an investigation, right? A fair and balanced investigation, or in this case, the controversy surrounding it. Initially, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, known as the BCA, that's the state's top investigative agency, was set to begin a joint probe with the FBI. That's standard practice. I repeat, that's standard practice. But within 24 hours, the U.S. Attorney's Office reversed course. The BCA announced it was informed by the FBI that they would now be the sole investigating body and that state investigators would no longer have access to evidence and interviews needed to conduct their own thorough investigation. You think there's something off right there, friends? In a press conference, Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz was blunt. It feels very, very difficult that we will get a fair outcome, he said, noting that without state involvement, Minnesotans would be deprived of transparency. How often do you ever see transparency in the Trump White House? You don't. A DHS official stated that the BCA hadn't been cut out, but that they simply don't have any jurisdiction in the investigation. This move effectively created a wall of silence. With state authorities shut out, the only official story being built is the federal one. It's a story that conflicts with what is seen in bystander video, where the agent who fired the shots, identified in court records as Jonathan Ross, is shown walking around after shooting with no obvious signs of injury. DHS Secretary Noem, however, stated the agent was hit by the vehicle and treated at the hospital. And it conflicts deeply with the person at the center of this storm, Renee Good. Now, Renee Good was a mother of three, a writer and a poet who had recently moved to the Twin Cities. Her mother described her as someone who was extremely compassionate, who had taken care of people her whole life. Now, how was it that this agent, Jonathan Ross, could just pull his weapon and shoot her 3 times point blank? How was that possible that it came to this? You see, Donald Trump has allowed these people to escalate their brutality and their violence. If this roadblock wasn't there, it would never have happened. We're pushing our luck here. We're pushing the envelope. We're using more and more brutal tactics, and we're getting less and less results. In fact, who's getting hurt are U.S. citizens, people who care about people. Now, those of you that think, well, she should have just obeyed the officer, you weren't there. You weren't there, and none of us ever want to be stopped on the road and harassed like she was. No one should be put in that position in America. This is America with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And now we're just going to go with military-type personnel and grab people and pull them out of cars and threaten them and shoot them point-blank range. There's something off here, people. There's something off. Okay, number 2 on my list here is the national pattern of deception. We've seen this a lot under Donald Trump, actually in his first administration as well. If the official story feels flimsy, it might be because we've heard variations of it before. The Renee Good shooting is not an isolated incident. It's part of a disturbing and repeating pattern. An analysis by the Marshals Project notes that in the months leading up to the Minneapolis shooting, federal officials had fired on multiple people in vehicles, often justifying the use of force by claiming the drivers were using their cars as weapons. In several of these cases, independent evidence later emerged that directly contradicted the federal account. Take the case of Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, shot and killed by ICE near Chicago. DHS claimed an officer was seriously injured, but body camera footage captured the same agent saying his injuries was nothing major. This is a pattern, an official claim of vehicle assault followed by contradictory evidence and lack of consequences. This is what we're going to find over and over again. There's never any consequences for these people. They are immune to prosecution. They are immune to criticism by anybody within the administration. Analysis from Just Security argues that the Department of Justice has largely failed to act, creating what it calls silence in the face of federal immigration agents' violence. Unlike city police, agencies like ICE and Border Patrol are often shielded by federal structures. They can operate in an accountability vacuum. So guess what? You can hire these people, many of them sociopaths, obviously, people who are angry, people who are willing to do this job. Give them guns and armor and masks, and they'll go and do whatever it takes, no matter who they hurt or who they step on, and no matter what really our Constitution tells us is the right thing to do. Now, this pattern extends well beyond the shootings that have occurred. Tactics like operating in plain clothes, wearing masks, and using unmarked vehicles are well documented and have drawn sharp criticism for years. Critics say that these tactics are designed to prevent identification and limit accountability. Of course they are. One congressman, renewing his concerns over these tactics, said incidents like the one in Minnesota are inevitable without true accountability. This is what we're talking about here, accountability. There is not any accountability. Now, the shooting of Renee Good happened within this context, a context of escalating aggression, contested narratives, and a glaring lack of oversight. This brings me to number 3 on my list here, the spark and the powder keg. This brings us back to Minneapolis, a city that knows better than most how a single incident of violence can ignite a nation. We all remember that. The killing of Renee Good is uniquely volatile for several reasons. First, the location, Minneapolis, is the global epicenter of the modern protest movement against police violence. Its communities are organized, politically experienced, and have a fragile, almost non-existent trust in law enforcement, especially armed agents in unmarked cars. We all should be suspicious of this, all of us. Don't look at Minnesota as some special place where just radicals live. We should all be suspicious because this violence against the public has been ongoing for decades. Second, the victim. Renee Good was a U.S. citizen, a mother, and a poet described as compassionate and kind. This profile directly undermines the government's attempt to portray her as a threat, making the official narrative harder for the public to accept. Third, the visible contradiction. This isn't just a case of public skepticism. The governor of Minnesota and the mayor of Minneapolis have explicitly and publicly stated that the federal government story does not match the video evidence they've seen. Mayor Jacob Frey called the self-defense argument garbage and, in one instance, bullshit. This creates a direct confrontation, a state government telling its citizens they are being lied to by the federal government. And, of course, they are. We've been being lied to about everything going on from the White House and this federal government since January of 2025. Let's be real about it, right? This confrontation is happening amid a massive surge of federal power. We know this. We've seen it. The White House has framed its high-visibility immigration blitzes as a necessary defense of law and order. Before the shooting, a surge of about 2,000 federal agents had been deployed in the Twin Cities area, described as the largest such operation in the metro area's history. This isn't just enforcement, it's militarization. It signals an intention to escalate. not de-escalate. And you can see from the actions of these agents across the nation, there's a trend to escalation. Minnesota's leaders seem to understand the danger. Governor Walz, while demanding justice, has also urged protesters to remain peaceful, saying they want a show. We can't give it to them. It's a chilling admission, a suggestion that he believes some in the federal government may be welcoming unrest to justify an even more brutal crackdown. Now, we do know that Donald Trump has been trying to escalate this in other cities. He's tried to send National Guard to more and more cities. Some of this has been stopped, but I believe he's just testing the waters here. I believe ultimately he would love to send troops into every blue city in the country. There are things holding him back, and that's U.S. citizens, that's the court system. Trump would love nothing more than for things to escalate, because then he can justify his brutality. He can justify sending troops into cities. He can justify declaring a national emergency. This is his ultimate goal. But what's holding him back, again, is the court system and public opinion. But remember, he will care less and less about that as we get closer to 2028. Now, what happened on Portland Avenue in Minneapolis was more than a shooting. It was a test of accountability, of transparency, and of the fragile trust between the government and the people it is meant to serve. We have a U.S. citizen who was shot and killed by a federal agent. And I will add this. I believe this was murder. We have a federal narrative of self-defense that is publicly disputed by the state's highest officials who have seen the proof. We have the state's investigators who were promised a joint investigation, only to be sidelined by federal authorities. And we have a documented nationwide pattern of incidents with little or no accountability. In fact, in most cases, no accountability at all. The federal government now has the control over the investigation. They are investigating themselves. This is how it works, friends. They're investigating themselves behind closed doors, after federal officials have already declared their agents innocent and the victim's guilt. For many, this is not the foundation of a credible investigation. It raises the question, is this the architecture of a cover-up? And I've been around a long time, have done a lot of investigation, and I can tell you this is the architecture of a cover-up. And Donald Trump is notorious for this. This single shooting in Minneapolis, Minnesota, has exposed a deep, dangerous fracture in American law enforcement, where federal agencies appear to operate by a different set of rules, shielded from local oversight, with local and federal authorities telling two different stories in a pattern of escalating tactics across the country. The question is no longer just what happened on the street in Minnesota, but what happens when a nation stops believing the people who are supposed to protect it. Okay, finally, I just want to say this. I believe that this is murder. And unfortunately, things said to him, he will never have any type of red flag put in his file, because these are the types of people the Trump administration and Kristi Noem wants on their federal ICE task force. In their search for ICE agents, they find the most brutal people they can find, pay them a lot of money, and let them go and do whatever it takes to get the job done. Doesn't matter who gets hurt. It doesn't matter that it's legal. It doesn't matter that the people are citizens of the United States. Just show force. And Trump is hoping, I believe, that something blows up, that he can escalate, that he can send federal troops in, that he can declare a federal emergency, that he can overwrite the courts, who are right now stopping him from putting troops in many cities. He wants to overpower the Constitution because Donald Trump wants to be king. He wants to be dictator. And my fears, as I've said in many of my other videos, I'm afraid of what he will do leading up to the 2028 election. I don't know. I've talked about it. Check out those videos on Loud and Clear, the Thompson analysis, which is now Clear Signal. Check out my videos. You'll find out what I believe, and I hope that you enjoy my content. If you do, please subscribe to this channel. Like the video and share it. Help us grow and reach more people with truth. Truth that very few outlets want to tell. It's not popular to tell the truth, friends. I'm here to tell you that. I've lost a lot of people I've known because I've told the truth. If you like the truth, join our group. Like, subscribe, and share. And remember, the bottom line is love your neighbor as yourself. I'll see you next time right here on Loud and Clear. And check me out on Clear Signal as well.